9 months of marriage. A growing life. A husband she trusted. But one fatal night, everything changed. It was a quiet night in Houston, Texas, as the city lights flickered against the dark sky and the hum of late-night traffic blended into the background. Inside a suburban neighborhood, behind the closed doors of a well-kept 2-story home, something horrifying unfolded, something that would leave an entire community in shock. The air inside the house was heavy, thick with the unmistakable scent of iron. A woman lay motionless on the cold tile floor, her body surrounded by a deep pool of red. Her once pristine cream-colored nightgown was stained dark, and her chest barely rose and fell. In her final moments, she had fought, her hands remained clenched with blood on her fingertips, as if she had tried desperately to hold on. A phone lay just inches away, its screen still glowing from the last outgoing call, a call that lasted only a few seconds before the line cut off, a weak attempt to reach help that came too late. At exactly 11:47 p.m., a 911 call came through to dispatch. At first, there was nothing but dead air, the dispatcher's repeated greeting met with silence. Then came a single, labored breath, a faint, almost unintelligible sound, as if someone was struggling to speak through immense pain, followed by silence, and the line went dead. Officers were immediately dispatched, their sirens slicing through the stillness of the night. Neighbors peered through their blinds as flashing red and blue lights reflected off their windows, and soon the street in front of Marisol Vieira's home was swarmed with police cars, paramedics, and detectives. The front door, unlocked and slightly ajar, let in a warm glow from the hallway that spilled onto the porch. Inside, the house was eerily undisturbed. The furniture was neatly arranged. A half-finished dinner sat untouched on the kitchen counter, and a glass of water had been knocked over, its contents still dripping onto the floor. In the corner of the bedroom stood a baby crib, assembled and ready for the arrival of the child Marisol had been eagerly expecting. And then there was Marisol herself. She had suffered multiple stab wounds, more than a dozen, according to early reports, with some to her chest, some to her stomach, and one final, deep cut to her abdomen. The crime was personal and deliberate, intended to ensure that she would not survive, and neither would her unborn child. By the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. At 32 years old and 8 months pregnant, Marisol was a successful businesswoman thriving in her career, actively engaged in her community, and filled with hope about becoming a mother. And now, she was gone. This wasn't a robbery, nothing had been taken. There was no sign of forced entry, no shattered glass, no broken locks, no evidence of a struggle except for the blood-soaked floor where she had tried, in her final moments, to crawl toward her phone. This wasn't a random attack. It was calculated, planned. Detectives scanning the scene soon noted something even more chilling: her husband, Desmond Kincaid, was nowhere to be found. By morning, the story had already begun to spread. A young, pregnant woman had been stabbed to death in her own home, and there was no immediate suspect. Yet those who knew Marisol, who had spent time with her in recent months, already harbored suspicions. Marisol Vieira was not merely a victim of violent crime, she was a woman who had unknowingly married a man with secrets, a man who had spent months crafting an illusion, playing the role of a devoted husband while preparing for the moment he would walk away, richer, free, and without a trace of guilt. But Desmond had left behind something he hadn't expected, and it would ultimately be the very thing that sealed his fate. Marisol Vieira had always been a woman in control of her destiny. At just 28, she had built something truly remarkable, a thriving business that was not only profitable but also a testament to her ambition, intelligence, and relentless drive. For the past decade, she had carefully crafted her reputation in Houston's competitive business scene, earning respect in an industry where few women broke through the glass ceiling. As the proud owner of a boutique consulting firm specializing in marketing strategies for emerging brands, she attracted clients not only with her expertise but with the vibrant energy she brought into every room. Known for her sharp instincts, unwavering work ethic, and genuine kindness, Marisol had achieved success through countless late nights and early mornings, firmly believing that everything worth having must be earned. Yet, despite all the accolades and financial security, there was one dream Marisol longed for above all else: a family. Years of focusing on her career had left a gap in her heart, a missing piece she hoped to fill one day. When Desmond Kincaid entered her life, she believed she had finally found that missing piece. Their meeting at a downtown Houston networking event felt almost cinematic. Desmond introduced himself confidently, tall and well-dressed, with a charisma that commanded attention. He explained that he had recently moved to Texas for work and was eager to build new connections in the finance industry. They exchanged numbers, and soon his texts filled her days, each message an invitation to meet again. Their relationship advanced quickly. Desmond had an uncanny ability to make her feel seen and heard, showering her with compliments and support. He was attentive and charming, always saying exactly what she wanted to hear. When he proposed just a few months after they met, Marisol accepted without hesitation, swept up in the passion of a romance that seemed to rewrite all previous timelines. Although some of her friends and family were taken aback by how quickly things were moving, Marisol was resolutely happy. She married Desmond just 9 months after their first meeting, believing with all her heart that she had found her forever. In the early days of their marriage, life appeared idyllic. They moved into a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, and Marisol continued to grow her business, while Desmond spoke confidently about his demanding job in finance, a job that required frequent travel. Then, just months into their marriage, Marisol discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy. She eagerly embraced the journey toward motherhood, preparing the nursery and dreaming of the future she would provide for her child. But as her pregnancy progressed, Desmond began to change. His once attentive demeanor faded into distance, his frequent absences became the norm. The man who had showered her with attention now appeared distracted and cold. At first, Marisol attributed his behavior to work stress and the pressures of a demanding schedule, but gradually she sensed something deeper was amiss. What she didn't know was that Desmond Kincaid had built his entire life on deception, and she had unknowingly become his latest target. Desmond Kincaid was 41 years old, a man who had spent years barely staying afloat. Living in Knoxville, Tennessee, with his wife Lorraine, 39, and their 3 children, he was supposed to be the provider, the man his family depended on. Yet his finances were in shambles, business ventures had failed one after another, debts were piling up, and loan sharks were calling. Lorraine had stood by him for years while working as a medical administrator, but the pressure was mounting. Their children needed stability, bills had to be paid, and Desmond was running out of time as creditors grew increasingly aggressive. With his back against the wall, Desmond devised a solution. One night, he sat Lorraine down and told her he had found an opportunity, one that would finally put them on solid ground. He claimed he had landed a well-paying job as a senior financial consultant at an investment firm in Houston, Texas. It was an opportunity too good to pass up, though it required him to relocate. Lorraine was hesitant yet relieved. If the job were real, it could change everything for them. Desmond reassured her that he would visit every month and send money home regularly, painting a picture of success that convinced her this was their way out. In truth, the job in Houston never existed. Desmond wasn't leaving Tennessee to work, he was leaving to find a woman who could finance his life. Houston wasn't a random choice. He had spent months researching a city where business opportunities thrived and where wealthy, independent women were accessible. He wasn't looking for a job, he was looking for someone to exploit. That's when he found Marisol Vieira. At 29, Marisol was everything Desmond needed: successful, intelligent, and financially independent. She owned a luxury event planning business that catered to high-profile clients, and her reputation in Houston's business world was solid. Hardworking, respected, and careful in her choices, she believed in love, which ultimately became her greatest vulnerability. Desmond met her at a networking event, introducing himself as a financial consultant with years of expertise. He played his role with confidence and ambition, showering her with attention and making her feel admired, positioning himself as the perfect partner. Their relationship moved quickly, and within months he had gained her trust by offering financial advice, helping her expand her business, and gradually integrating himself into her life. To Marisol, he was a hard-working man who had come to Houston to rebuild his life. He even told her he had been married once years ago and was now fully committed to her, never mentioning Lorraine. What she didn't know was that every month, Desmond was traveling back to Tennessee. To Lorraine, he was the dedicated husband working in Houston to secure their future, sending money home, visiting once a month, and maintaining the illusion of a devoted family man. To Marisol, he was a committed partner who occasionally had to travel for work conferences or client meetings, and she trusted him implicitly. 9 months into their marriage, Marisol was 8 months pregnant. She was excited and preparing for motherhood, believing she had finally found stability with a man who loved her. Meanwhile, Desmond wasn't planning to stay in Texas. By that time, he had gained everything he wanted: access to Marisol's bank accounts, connections to her business, and control over several of her assets. He had transferred money, secured investments in his name, and set himself up for a return to Tennessee. But there was one problem: Marisol had started noticing discrepancies. At first, the differences were small, numbers that didn't quite add up, business expenses she didn't remember approving. Soon, the inconsistencies grew larger: a missing transaction here, a withdrawal there that she was certain she hadn't made. Marisol wasn't someone to overlook details, and as she dug deeper, an uneasy feeling settled in her stomach. One night she pulled up her bank statements, scrolling through months of activity. Thousands of dollars had moved from her personal and business accounts, some wired to unfamiliar names, others withdrawn in cash. Several transfers had been made to a single account under Desmond's name. She felt sick. Had there been a mistake? As she compared records and checked receipts, it became clear that someone was draining her money. She recalled the times Desmond had insisted on handling the finances, assuring her that he'd take care of everything so she could relax. What had once felt like love now felt like control. She began watching him more closely. He always took work calls at odd hours, stepping outside and lowering his voice, keeping conversations brief. Sometimes he paced the room, whispering urgently; other times he would disappear for a while, only to return and act as if nothing was amiss. He had always traveled back to Tennessee once a month, dismissing his absences as business or family obligations. She had believed him, until doubts crept in. Why did he never let her accompany him on those trips? Her suspicions deepened one evening when she discovered plane tickets among his belongings, round trips from Houston to Nashville booked under a different last name. Her breath caught as the realization hit: Desmond wasn't who she thought he was. He was lying, stealing from her, and hiding something critical. The worst discovery came when she logged into her business account, the very one Desmond had insisted on managing, and saw a recent wire transfer of $15,000 sent to a woman in Tennessee. She didn't recognize the name, but she knew the address. It was the same city Desmond visited every month. As she searched through further transactions, rent payments, utility bills, even a school tuition payment, it became undeniable that she was financing Desmond's secret life. The woman was Lorraine Kincaid. Desmond had a wife and a family he had never left, and he had been using Marisol's money to support them. Her hands trembled as she reviewed the records. She couldn't stay silent, she needed answers, and she had to confront him. But Desmond had already noticed the shift in her behavior, the lingering glances at his phone, the double-checking of receipts. He knew she was uncovering the truth, and he wasn't about to let her reveal everything, especially with Marisol being 8 months pregnant. That changed everything. Desmond had always planned to leave. He never intended to stay in Texas forever. Yet with a baby on the way, his carefully built plan was slipping out of his control. If Marisol went to the police, if she exposed him, or if she cut him off, he would lose everything: the money, the stability, and the life he had built in Tennessee. He couldn't afford that. He needed to act before she did. Marisol had no idea she had already signed her death warrant. That night, While her thoughts were consumed with the hope of holding her baby in a few weeks, she prepared the nursery, folding tiny clothes, arranging them in drawers, and running her hands over the crib she had assembled just days earlier. Exhausted but excited, she awaited the arrival of her child. Her phone buzzed with a message from a close friend, someone who had recently noticed a change in her demeanor. She wasn't as bright, not as lively, and whenever Desmond's name was mentioned, her voice carried an unspoken heaviness. She typed a response but hesitated. Had she been imagining things? Could she really accuse her husband of such deception? A part of her wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that there was a reasonable explanation. She erased the message and typed, "I'll tell you everything soon." But she never got the chance. From the hallway, Desmond watched her closely. He had heard the soft chime of her phone and observed her hesitation before responding. She was too quiet, too careful, she knew too much. And Desmond was done with problems. Between 10:30 and 11 p.m., Marisol was attacked. Investigators pieced together the timeline from her last phone activity, nearby surveillance footage, and the horrifying scene officers uncovered. The first stab wound was deep, straight into her abdomen. The blade sliced through muscle, tissue, and organs, tearing into the life growing inside her. She fought back. Defensive wounds marred her arms and bruises marked her wrists, clear signs she had tried to escape. But Desmond didn't stop. The forensic report confirmed 17 stab wounds, most concentrated around her chest and stomach, ensuring there was no chance of survival. There was no forced entry, no sign of a break-in. She had trusted the man who killed her. At 11:07 p.m., 911 received a call. The line was open, but there was no voice, only shallow, broken breathing, a faint gurgling sound, and then silence. The dispatcher tried to trace the call, but it had already been cut. Marisol's phone was later found a few feet from her body, its screen shattered as if she had tried one last time to reach for help. The first officers arrived just after midnight. The front door was ajar, and inside the house was eerily silent, the only sound being the faint hum of a television left on in the living room. Then they saw the blood. It stretched across the tile, smeared in frantic streaks along the walls, and pooled beneath her body. And Desmond was gone. As she wondered why he would need to book flights under another name. The realization hit her in waves. Desmond wasn't who she thought he was. He was lying, stealing from her, and hiding something crucial. Then came the worst discovery of all. She logged into her business account, the one Desmond had insisted on helping manage, and saw a recent wire transfer of $15,000 sent to a woman in Tennessee. She didn't recognize the name, but she knew the address. It was the same city Desmond traveled to every month. The woman was Lorraine Kincaid. Marisol wasn't just being deceived. Desmond had a wife, a family he had never left, and he had been funding them with her money. Her hands trembled as she clicked through more transactions, rent payments, utility bills, even a school tuition payment. It was undeniable, she was financing Desmond's secret life. She couldn't stay silent. She needed answers, needed to confront him, but Desmond was already watching. He had noticed the shift in her behavior, the lingering glances at his phone, and the way she double-checked receipts. He knew she had found something, and he wasn't about to let her figure out the rest, especially since Marisol was 8 months pregnant. That changed everything. Desmond had always planned to leave. He never intended to stay in Texas forever. But with a baby on the way, his carefully built plan was slipping out of his control. If Marisol went to the police, if she exposed him, if she cut him off, he would lose everything, the money, the stability, the life he had built in Tennessee. And he couldn't afford that. He needed to act before she did. Marisol had no idea that she had already signed her death warrant. That night, she wasn't thinking about Desmond's lies or the money he had stolen. She was focused on her baby. She spent the evening preparing the nursery, folding tiny clothes, placing them carefully in drawers, running her hands over the crib she had assembled just days earlier. Though exhausted, she was excited. In a few weeks, she would finally hold her child in her arms. Her phone buzzed, a message from a close friend checking in. Lately, her friends had noticed a change in her. She wasn't as bright or lively, and whenever Desmond's name was mentioned, a heaviness seemed to fill her voice. She typed a response but hesitated. Had she been imagining things? Could she really accuse her husband of something so terrible? A part of her wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that there was a reasonable explanation. She erased the message and typed, "I'll tell you everything soon." But she never got the chance. From the hallway, Desmond watched her. He had heard the soft chime of her phone and seen the way she hesitated before responding. She was too quiet, too careful, she knew too much. And Desmond was done with problems. Between 10:30 and 11 p.m., Marisol was attacked. Detective Nolan Mercer, a seasoned investigator with the Houston Police Department who had seen his fair share of violent crime scenes, was one of the first assigned to the case. Yet something about this one was different, not just the brutality, but the sheer deliberation behind it all. There was no forced entry, no robbery, no sign of an outsider. It was immediately clear that Marisol had known her killer. The investigation began without delay. Neighbors were questioned, and security footage was reviewed. Within hours, Desmond Kincaid's name emerged at the top of the suspect list. But there was one problem: Desmond had disappeared. Calls to his phone went straight to voicemail, his car was missing, and his accounts had been emptied. It was evident that he hadn't just left, he had planned this. Detectives turned to Marisol's phone records. Her last messages, sent to a close friend, read, "I'll tell you everything soon," though she never got the chance. Interviews with friends and family painted a clearer picture of Desmond's behavior over the past months. He had grown increasingly controlling and secretive, his actions more erratic by the day. Then detectives uncovered the final, shattering piece of evidence: Desmond Kincaid wasn't just a grieving husband, he was a man living a double life. In Tennessee, he had a wife and children, a home and a life miles away from the one he had built with Marisol. Detectives tracked down Lorraine Kincaid, who was blindsided by the news. She hadn't seen Desmond in weeks, though she had spoken with him. According to Lorraine, Desmond had told her he'd accepted a high-paying job in Houston to support their family, visiting them once a month and sending money home while playing the role of a devoted husband and father. She had no idea that he was married to someone else, no idea that he was stealing from his second wife to fund the first. The breakthrough came with the financial records. Detectives traced every transaction Desmond had made over the past 6 months. Thousands of dollars had been withdrawn from Marisol's accounts and transferred into Desmond's private account, only to vanish. Some of the funds were funneled to Lorraine and the children, but much of it had been used to purchase a one-way plane ticket and secure a new identity. As the news spread, a pregnant woman murdered in her own home, a missing husband, and a trail of deception stretching across state lines, the hunt for Desmond Kincaid escalated from a local investigation to a national story. Here was a man who had led 2 lives, stolen from one wife to support another, and resorted to murder to keep his secrets from unraveling. For Marisol's family, however, the headlines and theories meant little. Her mother could no longer eat or sleep, she couldn't step into Marisol's home without breaking down. Her friends kept replaying their last conversations, wondering if there had been something more they could have done. Marisol's thriving business lay in ruins, plans for expansion were abandoned, and partnerships dissolved in the wake of her untimely death. And the worst part of all was the nursery, still intact, still waiting for a baby that would never arrive. The funeral became a moment of painful reckoning, a life that had held so much promise cut short in the most brutal manner imaginable. Marisol had trusted and loved Desmond, and in the end, she had died by his hand. The public clamored for justice, and investigators intensified their search. Leads emerged from Louisiana, then Florida, and even Georgia, but every time the net closed in on Desmond, he managed to slip away. Months passed until finally, a tip led authorities to a small town in North Carolina. A man matching Desmond's description was seen at a gas station, alone, nervously glancing over his shoulder, paying in cash. When U.S. Marshals arrived at a rundown motel nearby, they found him inside using a different name, armed with a fake ID and ready to start a new life. But it was over. Desmond Kincaid was arrested without a fight, and his trial was brutal. The evidence laid out every calculated move he had made, how he manipulated Marisol, drained her finances, and meticulously planned his escape. The jury didn't take long. Guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For some, this was justice; for others, it wasn't enough, because no sentence could bring Marisol back. Marisol's story transcended the typical crime report. It became a stark warning, a reminder that deception can wear a familiar face and that love, when placed in the wrong hands, can be deadly. Sometimes, the people we trust the most are capable of the greatest betrayal. Marisol's name would never fade from memory. Her family transformed their grief into action by establishing a foundation in her honor to help other women recognize financial and emotional manipulation before it's too late. Yet no amount of advocacy could restore the future she lost, the chance to hold her child, to watch her dreams unfold, and to live the life she had worked so hard to build. Though Desmond Kincaid is now locked away, his sentence stands as a bitter reminder of what he took from Marisol. Marisol thought she had found love. Instead, she found a lie that cost her everything. What do you think? Could this have been prevented? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to hear more true crime stories that reveal the dark truths behind deception, please like and subscribe to the channel.